Chana Paribhagaka Chatun Teddy of Viva. Some other hobby. Edible, Yagada Moha, Yagada Moha, Peruya, and Lansing, Chim. She was the last Sabino. Atipana, we saw. My God, Atipida, Itasa, Ragasa, Dosa, Moha, Mosa, Hanaya. Missy Anana. The Verosa Moha, Tidiatum Yogu, Peshabuya, Adwet, Lansing, Mashiva, Jim Mashiva, you Shinanga. You are very much Shiva, she everybody goes to later on, and tell you to me. Now, Shiva, Lansing, Shiva, you
Shadow says, Shadow has explained about the discussion between Venerable Elder Ananda and the wandering ascetic Channa. Venerable Ananda showed what defects are there in those impurities such as lust, hatred, and delusion. After describing all those defects clearly, still the wandering ascetic wasn't satisfied with his answer properly. So therefore he again counter-questioned to Venerable Ananda. That you have given the answer, you also prescribed how to overcome those impurities or defilements, seeing what sorts of defects. Still, I would like to know whether in your dispensation are there any right path and right ways and right technique to overcome those defilements or those impurities. So he directly asked what kind of way, right way you have, what kind of technique you show to overcome those impurities. That Venerable Ananda simply answered again, dear friend Channa, we have well prescribed technique, we have right way and path to overcome those impurities.
She the last, she had to do a fillet upon her. The body by this, he lands in her body, let it gentle killing a chase of this one. The same thing near Katamo Pana, we saw my God. Katama Padimata, Itasa, Rakasa, Dosa, Samosa, Pahanaya. Mishi Anana. The Velosa Moha. That he Peshabuya to it. Lansing Pavaro. လက်တွေ့အကျင့်မှာပါတော့ဒီလိုဆက်ပြီးနေရတယ်ဆက်ပြီးတော့အရှင်းလာတာကအရာမျိုးအဲ့ဒီရောအထင်ပြောမယ်ပေါ့စီယတိတံသမာဓိတိသမာစေတဘောသမာဝါကျသမာကမ္မတော့သမာအာဇီဝသမာဝါယမောသမာစတိသမာစမာဓိလည်းရှိပါစီတယ်အဲ့ဒါပါပဲလမ်းကြီးအဲ့ဒါပါပဲအကျင့်ဒီလိုပါလား
The question and answers are yes and no answers. When the wandering ascetic asks, are there any ways and any paths and any technique to eradicate them? Then Venerable Ananda just replied, yes, there are. So therefore the wandering ascetic again asks another question. What are those paths? What are those ways? What are those techniques through which in your dispensation you can overcome those impurities? Then Venerable Ananda replied, Ayameva Ariyo Attangiko Mago. The practical way and practical path, practical technique to eradicate to those defilements is only the Eightfold Noble Paths. These are the paths through which one can overcome those defilements, those impurities, such as right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These are the prescribed paths and ways and techniques to eradicate those impurities. So Sayadaw says, Venerable Ananda, the answer of Venerable Ananda is very simple. He just said these are the 8 noble paths through which one can overcome those impurities. So Sayadaw also has already given the answer. He says, does he need to explain all these things? You might have already understood the answer. Have you got the answer?
Patagogo Auso Mago Badika Padida Itasa Ragasa Dosasa Moasa Pahanaya Alan Japana Uso Ananda Apamadaya William Chichi Nala Lula Namala Lula Mudiu Missy Ananda Jim Naziha Koma Chitty Let me change the look at the Padilla, I never come on it. Padilla, so Balufu, Yamaroda Moa, Beta Fuya, come on. That's it another. Tiloha, Tiloha one. But normally, a Moboma Saguya, Tino, they take down the Abamara, Tinto Lava, လိုတော့မှသူကချီးကျူးပြီးတော့ပေါ့လေဆုံးမသွားတယ်ဒီတရားနာတယ်လို့ချီးကျူးဆုံးမသွားတယ်ဒီပြီးသွားတာဒါတော့မပြောနိုင်ဘူးပေါ့လေသူကရှင်နန္ဒကတော့ငါတို့ဒါကျွန်တော်တို့ကမောဟငြင်းမှုအကျင့်တွေသင်ကြားတဲ့အကျင့်တွေတမတ်ခြင်းရှိနေတယ်ငါတို့ကတမတ်ခြင်းရှိတယ်ငါတို့ကတော့အခြားပုဂ္ဂိုလ်တွေတမတ်ခြင်းမရှိဘူးဆိုတော့အဲလိုတမတ်ရာဌာနဒီဗုဒ္ဓသာသနာဓမ္မဝိနည်းခေါ်တဲ့ဒီဗုဒ္ဓသာသနာမှာလာရှိတယ်လို့ဒီလိုပြောရတယ်ဒါပဲအဲဒီလိုပြောလိုက်လို့ရှိရင်ခုနခြံနာအစရှိတဲ့ပြပိုက်ဘာဟိရသမယမှာပေါ့လေတကယ်တည်ကြတဲ့ရာဂဒေါသမောဟကြီးရောအကျင့်ကောင်းကြီးမရှိဘူးလို့ပြောပြီးတော့ဖြစ်သွားတာ
After the answer, the wandering ascetic accepted the saying of Venerable Elder Ananda, and he praised to Venerable Ananda. The path is marvelous, my dear friend. The way is beautiful, my dear friend. The technique is gracious, my dear friend. These techniques, these paths, and these ways are sufficient for you to have heedfulness. You can get the heedfulness or earnestness in your life through the practice of this path, of this way, of this technique. Sayadaw says, whether the praise comes through real understanding or not, he doesn't know. But the praising words were there in the text, and he accepted the answer. Venerable Ananda had already explained him the real path, real way, and real technique to overcome the defilements are only in the dispensation of the Buddha. There wasn't such technique in another religion, in another views. The word is used as Bahira Samaya. In another, how to say, Samaya could be idea, Samaya could be way of life, Samaya could be religion. So many meanings could be gained by that word. So therefore, from the beginning, Venerable Ananda forcefully told him the way to overcome the defilements is there only in the dispensation of the Buddha. That means there isn't proper way in another ideas, another views, and another religions. So therefore, whether the Channa wandering ascetic understood the saying of Venerable Elder Ananda or not, which we couldn't know, but the praise was there with sweet words and highly praising words.
Yeah. အဲဒီဟာကိုရှင်းပြတယ်ဘုန်းကြီးတို့ Yogi Purvi Deva Purvi
So Sayadaw says, before we should try to estimate all these things, try to see through our own practice and own experiences whether the statements are true or not.
Buddha Buddha do Pasadi ya Pishi ni la Pishi ya dai Shulu shi ya Shuya ang liu ma sikli sa jara Tuwa mandi Yung nga ni na yo Changgu ni na yo Ila amya siya tuwa ba so chiya so Iwa ta na nga ni pili ya Yogi Purvi Sujabadu Kaune Kaita Hawaii Buddha Something from Shari Pena Leve Yogi Navy Vishado Jam Kibola Jam Kibola so ye Paramata Ada Pijaka Ayawadi Nyamo Ayawadi John Young Kid she I look chilly that she will shoot at it. Shoot at the Matilla. Erodilla. Tija, the Mawatiani, don't need to shall be for the Tija, the Mawatiani. Soon shall we Savia. A jump said the real of the There are how would they Bobo will keep your brother, how get this said near the Gauna, Sierra, Chelsea, Gauna. Your good water indicator, other about the water indicator. She has a music. I do it. I don't know, Dini is Rishi. It is a gem in an estate that was Paro, Sijapola, and a fountain. So there's a money. Oh, my Jonia said, someone wanted to buy. So then, near Pongo, Mangaza shooting it, some of the farmer. So there's a shooya out, I said, Sushi. Somebody didn't know that, so the material piano. I never can go and see it. Singing a Sushi. Some of the money making a kid. I remember saying that Chindaga did in the toilet, some of the government making a kid. Dead or down the thing, look like you. He had already a bit. Now she might have the other. The Marina, the same dead or a farmer. John and two people did that. Now you for you to go beside the people. What's somebody making it? Shoot, did I pa? When they got met, call it in another pa. The word did that, so did it double go. Maybe I'm the same generation, someone was there, someone governor, some other see. Yours, you don't know. Yours, you know, the other who showed me the more of money is. What do you make of it? I let me go out with that. I don't make any. When I'm your lay, so that I'm actually going in a ship. I should really enjoy it in a ship. But we're not going to see the other one. So you don't get that come up. Body came out of the so. Yagaga more agenda. Unless I need to be 11 agenda, I don't know more. The money made in a city of China, China. Give you that it came out. ဒါပညာမဲ့ခင်နဲ့မြို့ကိရိတာပါဆားတဲ့မှာပြတ်သွားဘယ်လောက်ကောင်းလဲတရားမျိုးအဲ့ဒီအထင်မျိုးမဲ့ဘောဆိုတာပါအရာအောင်စောမဲ့ဘောအရာမတိဝတာဣတ္တသဒါကသဒောသသမောဟသဘာဟာနာယဆိုတာရှင်းနေတာရှင်းကြချက်နဲ့ယောဂီရဲ့ကိုယ်ရင်းနဲ့တိုက်ကြည့်တော့ဒီမှာအဲ့လိုတိုက်ကြည့်တော့ဒါကြီးတင်းပြီဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အရိယောဆိုတဲ့အတိုင်းအရိယောဆိုတာပရိသုတ်တော့ပဲတော်ကြီးစိတ်ကျင်းနေတာဘုရားရောတော့မောဟကျမ်းလုံးစိတ်ကျင်းနေတာစိတ်ကျင်းနေတယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ပုတ္တမောဝါဆိုတာပုတ္တမောစေတနာကြတာနည်းနည်းတော့အဲ့လိုတန်ရှင်းမြင့်မြတ်တဲ့သင်္ကရှိရရင်ပြည်စုံတဲ့ဘုရားအကျင့်လမ်းစဉ်တဲ့အဲ့ဒါကြီးပေါ့တစ်ချက်မှတစ်ချက်ပွားနေတာအဲ့ဒါအလုံးသင်ချပါလေ
Sayadaw says, if we try to analyze through our own experience or through your own experience during the practicing moment, you are following the formula which the Buddha had given and Sayadaw has described from the beginning. Bhutang bhutato passati. The yogis see the phenomenal aspects as they are. In each and every moment when they follow precisely the instructed way of practice. We don't need to go to analyze each and every noting object. Thus we can pick up the primary object to see and try to understand whether the statement of Venerable Ananda's is true or not. Suppose we are noting rising. While we are noting rising, if we really follow the factors of Eight Noble Path in that noting, and we use all those factors together in our noting or in your noting, you can see clearly those phenomenal aspects in that rising process. The rising object is Bhuta. It is there. You cannot deny that it is not there. It is there with the phenomenal aspects. While you are clearly noting the rising, you can see various phenomenal processes there. There would be tension, there would be stiffness, there would be pressure, there would be movement. All these are bhutas. The elementary forces of the wind element. The wind element is present there. And you can see in the rising all those elements. While you are seeing all those elements are true elements. they are occurring there. Through your observance, each time when you note the rising as rising precisely, not only you can see the elements, even you can clearly understand how that rising is arising there, because there is the breathing process. Because of the inbreathing, rising is there. And you can clearly know the rising is wind element. And in that wind element, there are many forces as the elementary force. So you can see all those elementary force. Wind element is one of the absolute truth, or the perfect truth, Paramattha Dhammas. So when you are observing all those aspects, even in single noting of rising, then you are seeing all those objects, all those phenomena, bhutato, as they are. And gradually, if you develop your noting, the rising which you are noting, it doesn't stay longer. After noting, it dissolves, it disappears, it passes away. So you also know, oh, these elementary forces, or the object of rising is immediately passing away. It arises and passes away. It is not stable one. It is impermanent. So you understand the nature of impermanency of the rising process. When you see the rising impermanency in the rising process, then you also can see the object which is all the time arising and passing away, that cannot give you real pleasure and happiness. You can see the dissatisfactoriness in it, because whenever something arises, they are dissolving. You cannot keep it as you like, as you want to. So when you cannot keep something as you like and as you want and as you desire, it couldn't give you any pleasure, any happiness. So therefore, that element, that object is suffering too. And not only you will see the suffering nature in that rising process, even you can see how non-substantial that object. It is not in your control. You cannot keep the rising all the time as rising. You cannot see any permanency, everlasting substance there. So that is non-substantial nature which you can see in that rising. So in this way, even the single noting of rising, you can see clearly the physical and mental process. You can see the cause and effect process, and you can see the general characteristics of each and every arising object as impermanent, unsatisfactoriness, and non-substantial. And all these things you can clearly see because at that time you are following the Eight Noble Path. You are using the Eight Noble Factors in your practice. Then try to analyze now how those Eight Noble Paths are there as a separate limbs while you are trying to note the rising object. When it arises as rising, what you need to have as the one of the Eight Noble Paths to get the rising as rising. At first it is necessary to have effort. Without effort you cannot drive your mind, or you cannot push your mind, or you cannot send your mind towards that arising object to get immediately. And you cannot wait for longer period to arise the effort. Whenever the object arises, you need to send immediately the effort to get the rising object. So the effort is necessary to note the rising object as rising. So you are making mental effort. You are trying to create or produce mental strength in that single noting of rising. So the one limb as effort is there from the Eight Noble Paths. And after that you want to get the rising as a whole process from the beginning to the end as rising. Without having proper observing power, you cannot get the rising process as rising. So observing power, awareness should be there at that moment to note the rising as rising. Because of the observing power or awareness or mindfulness, you can get the rising process without missing the rising from the beginning to the end. And the second limb is there as the Eight Noble Factors. And to see clearly the rising object without having well-focused mind on that rising process, you cannot get what thing is the rising. So to get the rising clearly, your mind should be well placed on the rising object. And that is the right concentration, focusing your mind on the object. And to get the rising process precisely, accurately, constantly, if your aiming is not there, although you may have effort, although you may have observing power, although you may have concentration, if the aiming is not falling precisely there, then you may slip out from that object. So precise aiming must be there at that time to get the rising process as rising clearly, obviously. So there is the right aiming process as the right thought. When you are observing in that way, using all these mental forces, during that noting period of rising, and you get the rising process clearly, what happens? Then you can see clearly, in the rising there is pressure, in the rising there is tension, in the rising there is movement, in the rising there is stiffness, in the rising there is hardness, softness, and so on and so forth. You can see each and every elementary forces during that moment, and when you see clearly those objects, understanding is there. Yes, there is all sorts of phenomenal aspects. They are real ones. Understanding comes. Right understanding is there. So these are the 5 limbs of factors you are using all the time when you are trying to note one of the arising objects. And during that moment, what about other 3 limbs of the 8 Noble Path? Those other 3 limbs are previously well kept in your mind. At that time, you are not trying to do any unwholesome acts physically, verbally, and you are not committing any kind of those physical and verbal actions to live your life. So right speech is there, right action is there, right livelihood is there. All these 8 noble paths are there, even in single noting of rising. And then try to see, while you are having all these 8 noble paths in your noting, and you are clearly understanding the process of rising as rising, and seeing each and everything clearly, what effect you get, what is the advantage there in such noting? Is there any kind of defilements as transgression? Is there any kind of defilement of obsessive? Or is there any kind of dormant defilements? While you are possessing those 3 limbs as the morality group, during that moment there couldn't arise the defilement of transgression. While you are possessing all those concentration group mental forces, during that moment there couldn't arise any kind of obsessive defilements. And while you are really understanding the true nature of the rising process as rising with all sorts of phenomenal aspects, could there arise any kind of dormant defilements? Because right understanding is there. While right understanding is there, the dormant defilement, sleeping type of defilement, couldn't arise, although it may be a momentary one. So therefore, all those defilements, there couldn't arise lust, there couldn't arise hatred, there couldn't arise ignorance. So these defilements are totally overcome during that moment. And then the analysis which we are trying to do, that the 8 noble path is there to overcome the defilements, is true or not. We can check out it.
As a making shape, India, second name, ဖြစ်နေလို့ရှိရင်ဒါဖြစ်ပွားစေတာပဲတိုးတက်စေတာပဲစိတ်ကောင်းတဲ့အတိမှန်ပေါ်နေတော့တိုးတက်အောင်ပြုလုပ်နေတဲ့ဘာဝနာဆိုတဲ့ဟာကိုသိတယ်ပေါ့လားသိတယ်ပေါ်လာ
So Sayadaw says, before also he has already mentioned that while you are following the Eight Noble Path, at that time your mind becomes pure and clear. So purity of mind is there. And when the mind is pure, what happens? You will get the another aspect as Uttama. The purity is the meaning of Arya. Arya means purity. When you are following the path of purity, then the mental purity will be there. And when mental purity will be there, and then your mind, life is Uttama. It is raising up, becoming pious. And that piousness, purity, comes through what? Comes through development. Development of mind. So when you can develop your mind to purify yourself, to upraise yourself, to uphold yourself, to make it pure and clear and bright, that is called development. So it is the meaning of bhavana. Bhavana means development. What development? Mental development. For what? To purify. Each and every moment, if we are following those Eight Noble Paths, that is the bhavana. We are trying to develop ourselves.
ချိန်တိုင်းနဲ့တွက်မယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဒီနေ့ဒီစိတ်ဆက်ဆက်နဲ့ရှုမှတ်နေတဲ့ယောဂီပုဂ္ဂိုလ်တွေဟာအများကြီးပဲတောင်းတဲ့တိတ်နဲ့ရှိပြီးတော့ပေါဝင်တဲ့စိတ်ကြီးဖြစ်နေတာဝတ္တဆက်ပေါ့ယောဂီတွေကြောက်ကြတယ်ဒီနေ့7နာရီဒီနေ့16နာရီလို့ချုပ်တယ်ဒီနေ့18နာရီဒီလိုပြောကြတယ်တိတ်အားရဆိုတော့ဘုန်းကြီးဒီလိုနာရီများကြီးပေါ့လေအထုနေနေကြားတော့တိတ်ဝင်တယ်အိမ်မကလက်ဒီလာရလို့လက်ဒီလိုအိတာမှာဒီမှာကြီးတောင်နေပေါ့လေချထားရအဲ့ဒီတောင်ကြီးချထားရတယ်ဒီမှာလက်ပါဒီလိုမျိုးတက်ဆက်ပေါ့ကျန်တဲ့တိတ်မရှိတော့ဘူးဘုန်းကြီးကတပတ်ပဲရှိတော့ကျူးတတ်ကြတယ်
The Sayadaw says, really you are developing yourself to have purity and to have the high-leveled humanity within you. There are yogis, some are describing how much they are making effort in their practice. They are doing the practice for 14 hours. Some are doing the practice for 16 hours. Some are doing the practice for 18 hours. If you try to see clearly second after second, minute after minute, hour after hour, thousands and thousands times you are trying to develop yourself. Millions of times you are trying to develop yourself. In each and every noting, if it may take 1 second, and you are continuously doing it for 14 hours, try to see yourself how much developments are there. So therefore Sayadaw says he has great satisfaction when he hears that the yogis are making great effort in their practice. When he hears 14 hours, he gets pleasure. When he hears 16 hours, he gets more pleasure. When he hears 18 hours, oh, he was happiest one. And he forget all the duties which he has to perform in the Sasanayeta in Burma. For him, really, the duty in Sasanayeta was so great and so burdensome. Leaving all those duties and coming here, when he hear all those practices done by the yogis, so it is natural to have such happy feeling in his mind. Otherwise, it may turn in another way.
ကျုပ်မြေသမီးယောဂီပြောတယ်14နာရီမှာ3နာရီပဲအိတ်တယ်ဖေ။ဒါဝင်တာပါ။သို့တော့မြို့သားပဲကတော့အိတ်ပြီးပြောတာရှိသေးတယ်။
So and the shadow also mentioned that there wasn't any men yogis who told that.
New Tabay, you don't see a Goya level. Going to New Tabay, my body. New Tabay, new to me, my hero, 6 head and many of the new of it. Don't you that? Many of Doni, Makanji, Lulu, Balu,
So Shadow also feels that when he couldn't hear anyone saying they are just sleeping 2 hours from the side of men yogis, although he is a monk, he also in the category of male. So he has some dissatisfaction in his mind. Oh, the winning point is turning towards the other side.
The Manalo Mogo. Manalo resolution, go to a Gumina to the
It doesn't mean that he is jealous about that. He has compassion to each and every yogis. So Sayadaw says, urges to all the yogis, try your best. Now we have only weeks' time to do the practice.
Buddha the Pasati said the Zuma. Buddha, ya, lives and in a quiet solution. Kumuya 11, Tesha Pony the Kumuya Buddha. Tesha Pony the Kurese Kama, Kanamu Kanamu. The new will never die the Buddha. The good in that chance, you die the Buddha. You Jamu Namu Sam. Associated with the body, I Buddha. I could die in a Sita Dama. Tisha Povek, my body. Like you on a very time. Yes, I can never consider you shoot. Surely she do. Dija, the Bawa and Nina. Do you need the Bawa and Nina? I mean, I will know. Yanesi phone, the one Yanesi pay, the Europe, the one Yanesi pay, one. Dog one, since I said I one. So they know that for you, Buddha, Dabasati, Tisha Polare, I will not see that Dama for it. I will need to look his hammer. Things are near a machine, I will solution. That I don't have more activity, I pay my mom. I'm going to be tiny. Well, I think that maybe she bought a movie on the film of her. I go to a chorizo. She had to have a new cycle about the design. The reason about an idea is quantity is maybe she bought to the other part of the food and the salad. Yes, I'm Sanji Bakery, Jetta, City Patan. We're at her. We're at the some real attitude of Michael, some other Tisha Pola, Kawi, and I think that I need it. Or by my life, it should have been something I leave out. The boy, when Luech or what I put with him, making Shiva, the Jindia, the Luech or the Mushika. Isanki Sanki Baku, Chata, City Batana, Aradotis, Aria, I think, and some of the Pintandia, Liva, Chuja, or about Yara, is a mission, and Pencha, a sound. I really seen the point. One guy is a mission, when I make a ship at the other children. A little bit out of the people, the main one that we need to be one and a little one with the people when I see the other thing. The reason I don't need by the side. So you go for now, to get me by the situation.
Sadhu says, if we try to check the formula with the practice of 4 Satipatthana, Bhutam Bhutato Pasati, all the physical processes, whatever may arise in our body, all processes are there at the moment, at present. So therefore they are Bhuta. One of the aspects of Satipatthana, first aspect as the Kaya Anupassana. So all those physical processes are Bhuta. In the same way, whatever sensation might be there, pleasurable or painful or neutral, all those sensations are present there. So therefore they also Bhuta. And all those mental processes, all sorts of thoughts, imaginations and others are Bhutas. They are there in our practice, each and every moment arising. So therefore the mental processes also Bhuta. And mental object processes also there, as seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching, and thinking various way. Other objects also arising one after another. All those processes are the mental object processes. So they are there. Therefore, those mental object processes also Bhuta. So in this way, physical processes are Bhuta, sensational processes are Bhuta, mind processes are Bhuta, mental object processes are Bhuta. And those Bhutas we can see clearly following the Eight Noble Path. When we use those Eight Noble Factors in our each and every noting, then we can see those Bhutas as they are. So physical, whenever there will arise physical object, try to get immediately to see clearly and to note clearly, then we can get as it is, as they are. So Bhutato is there. When we see the Bhuta as they are, then there is the understanding, there is the realization. And when we can see clearly in that way all those phenomenal aspects, and there is another advantage that we are eradicating or overcoming all those defilements. We are removing from our mind all those impurities. So in this way, each and every moment we are in the sphere of Bhuta, and while we are using all those Eight Noble Factors, to see clearly them, and we are seeing them Buddhato. So pasati is the verb, seeing as they are, Buddhato pasati. That's why the Buddha himself mentioned, if you follow the Eight Noble Path to see clearly the four Satipatthana practices each and every moment, then you are there really to understand the true nature of the all those processes, as well as you are there to extinguish the suffering processes of your life or of your existences. But if you couldn't do that, if you couldn't follow the Eight Noble Path, and if you couldn't clearly see again and again the four foundations of Satipatthana, then you couldn't be able to see clearly those things, and you slip off from such understanding. You miss to see the actual true nature of your life, and then you cannot eradicate the suffering also. So therefore Sayadaw used the Pali words, how important to do the practice of Satipatthana and to follow the path of eightfold ones. Sayadaw says the time is over. Sayadaw will try to explain again tomorrow.